Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Beckler webinar today on winning with AI. You'll also notice we've put real-time speech-to-text detection on today, and we've enabled it for this webinar, so we thought we would put it in for a live example of AI throughout the webinar, seeing as it is an AI webinar as well. So we've got some great content in store today, so let's get straight in. But before we do this, let's just cover off the usual process around questions and chats. Christine, if you don't mind swapping to the next slide for me.
Yeah, I'm trying. It seems like the first one is ornery. There we go.
There we go. So highlighted in red is where you can put any questions or discussion points. And at the end of the webinar, we will go through all of them in our usual Q&A format. So in terms, let's do a quick introduction as well. So you've got myself, Ajay Topa, so I look after the Business Solutions Department at Beckler UK. I also come from a bit of a Microsoft background as well. But we are joined by the star of the show, Christina Leo. So Christina's got years of experience with SQL databases and business intelligence. So she's made the natural shift over to the world of AI with the industry leader that is Microsoft as well. So we're in good hands today. In terms of the format, there's going to be 4 parts to this section today. So we're going to begin with a clear definition of AI, and we feel that's important because the term is used broadly and it has become a bit of a buzzword. So it's important we simplify and define where our lines are, if any lines at all. We're then going to, so number 2, we're then going to look at where you could potentially begin with AI, so start winning. So we're going to take the definition and start to define some key pillars of success that AI is built around. And then we're going to, once that foundation is built, we're then on number 3, we're going to start to do something with that data. And it's important we look at what that data transformation looks like, how to manage it, so the solutions around it, and what you could potentially do with it. So we're going to start to use some examples as well. And then finally, we're going to finish on an AI maturity curve, so you can start to see where you are in your business sit right now. And hopefully that provokes some thought around what you need to do to move up that maturity curve. So let's get straight into it, and I'm going to hand over to Christina to go into that definition.
Thanks, Ajay. Really appreciate you guys joining me today. So what do we mean by winning with AI, and why should we care? Normally, I show a little video of this app, but today I couldn't, so I had to share a screen grab from the Microsoft site. Imagine you're visually impaired and an app on your phone infused with image recognition and text-to-speech capability can turn the world into an audible experience. What if you were a hearing impaired student and just having something as simple as Teams in the classroom can help you communicate in real time with your classmates and be included in a way you never were before? Microsoft Teams, y'all, that's definitely not a single use case technology. This is digital transformation in action. And for me, this is winning with technology and AI. We win by focusing our digital transformation on these 3 pillars. We win by empowering people, as we saw in the Seeing AI example. We win by being inclusive and practicing human-centered design, as we described the use case of the hearing impaired student in the classroom, by putting people first, not just the mainstream population. We also win by building trust in that technology, that it's there to support us, not to hinder us. But before we dig deeper, let's look at what AI means to Microsoft. Despite all the recent progress and potential, AI is probably one of the least understood technologies. And that's not surprising because AI isn't something you can see or touch. In fact, most of us probably rely on technology that uses AI every day without even knowing it. If you used our Bing search engine, or built a PowerPoint presentation, or watched this session today as you see the live captioning going across the screen, if you've dictated a text into your phone and had WhatsApp send it away, you're most definitely using AI. For our purposes today, the term AI refers to a broad range of technologies that do things similar to what people can do. They can perceive images and sounds and recognize them. They can reason over large amounts of data to identify patterns. They can help with decision making by making predictions and understanding the relationship between various people, places, or things. And the coolest part is that AI can learn from these inputs and interactions and get better over time. This is a huge shift in technology. We used to have to learn how to use machines, but now they can learn from us and adapt to how we work best. All of these AI advances are allowing people to develop technology that can interact with people in more natural ways. And at Microsoft, we're truly excited about the possibility of AI augmenting and amplifying human ingenuity. We want to empower every person and every organization to achieve more. And with the power of technology and the power of AI, we're seeing this happen more and more. That's our definition of winning. Before the lockdown, I used to use AI every weekend to help me avoid traffic when I drive down to Hamble to join my race sailing team. Now, AI helps me be more productive with my email by filtering messages to only those items I need to focus on. And it helps me organize meetings by searching people's diaries to find a time slot that suits everybody. It's not just me. You see examples of AI helping people all over the world every day. So, how do we build trust in AI technology? At Microsoft, we focus on 6 principles, which all AI systems need to follow. This diagram is deliberate in how it's designed. In the center, we have reliability and safety, and privacy and security, because these are areas where the industry and Microsoft have already made great advances. We now need to focus on the application of those advances to AI systems as well. Fairness is important because AI systems should be designed to treat people fairly and avoid bias. Yet we know that society is filled with biases. So is the data, which reflects that society. We need to invest in research and develop we need to invest in research and develop mechanisms to test for biases in data and for offsetting those biases so they do not manifest in inferences and recommendations which continue to perpetuate and create new discriminations. On the left-hand side, we've got inclusiveness. AI systems have the potential to create a great digital divide, or they can narrow that divide which already exists. We believe that AI should be used to make computer systems more accessible to everyone, and that they should augment the abilities of people, understand their needs, and respect their individual preferences. Now, transparency and accountability are running horizontally because these 2 principles are foundational to all the rest. With transparency, we mean that AI systems should be understandable. Today, this is a real challenge and a long-term research problem which some of our greatest minds are dedicated to. Even today, we can take steps to make systems more comprehensible by documenting the data sources that they learn from and by appropriately demonstrating the probabilistic nature of the recommendations that the system is making. Lastly, accountability. We believe that the designers and developers of AI systems should ultimately be accountable for their use. We carry a level of responsibility for the application of the solutions we create. We must have the organizational safeguards built into our business and the culture to guide our people, our company, and our customers to consider and protect the individuals affected by these systems. Building trust through responsible AI principles is our differentiator as the technology becomes more and more a part of the products and services that people use every day. These are our guiding principles. You can use them or adapt them to your company's vision, but most definitely start talking about them amongst yourselves and with your customers. Now I'm going to hand over to Ajay to talk about the Bechla approach.
Thanks, Christina. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to take the Microsoft pillars and those themes and start to look at an approach around AI. And this is our Bechla approach as well, which we work with Microsoft on. So, we're fully aware that this is not for everyone, certainly not right now. And we're also aware, and like Christina mentioned, that you're likely already using aspects of AI in your everyday life, routine, projects at work. So we realize that some incremental changes and improvements could be actually all you need. So I think the most important part of this, and if you look on the left-hand side, is that we understand your existing systems. we need to have a look at what you already have in place and what you could improve before you consider any large, costly rip and replaces. But at the same time, let's also understand your ability to change and adopt AI solutions, because any system that is put in has to, one, scale with your business growth, really. With all that in mind, though, it's very clear that no one size fits all, and that's kind of the second point. And the change has to come from the top down with something like this, for it to be truly worth it, and you see the return and make a difference within your business. So where do you begin with AI? And what we do is we focus on three core areas in terms of where you start. Firstly, it's system processes. And I mentioned this earlier. Think about how you can add AI capability to your existing products and services that you already have in place. More importantly, try to have in mind specific use cases in which AI could solve business problems and provide demonstrable value. So that's really a good place to start, because that then moves us into technology capability. There's usually a big difference between what you want to accomplish and what you have the organizational ability to actually achieve within a given time frame. So it's important to recognize this, and that gap can come in many different forms. It could be maturity of innovation in your industry, financial limitations, training of internal users, your back-end systems, and that's usually a common theme. Your back-end systems are usually holding you back. But by addressing the internal capability gap means that identifying what you need and the processes that you need to change are required, which can then help you internally evolve before we then get going with any AI solution. And then finally, starting small. So it sounds kind of obvious, but the best way to prove AI can make a difference is by making small changes in your end user's everyday life and drip feed the solutions in, because any big change, that rip and replace that I mentioned, can cause quite a negative adoption as well. Christina, do you have anything further to add to that?
No, the only thing I want to say here is that when you're considering system purpose, think about what if you're building a system to make retail recommendations, that's one thing. If you're building a system that's going to drive cars for you, that's a whole other critter, as we say in Tennessee. So you really need to make sure that you've got the testing and the data in place that sorry, I'm babbling. You want to think about the risk and outcomes associated with the application and measure those reasonably so that you can design your system to accommodate that risk. And the point about technology capability is this even a problem that AI can solve? Can we throw a machine learning algorithm at this and solve this problem or not? Sometimes you can't. So you need to have a good bit of discussion beforehand to make sure that AI is really the tool that you need to be using to solve this problem. And one thing we didn't talk about here is quality and reliability. Will the technology be effectively designed, operated, and maintained by a responsible party? Have you tested the devil out of it before you release it into production? And can we explain how we got to the answers that we arrived at? So when we talk about transparency, are we able to show the data that we use to train the model and then give a good, clear explanation of how we're arriving at the retail recommendation that we might be suggesting? So those are just a few things to think about when you're in the design processes with your development groups. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Is that all right?
Thank you, Christina.
Cool. Right. So AI as a catalyst for digital transformation. How do we take full advantage of all the benefits AI can bring to our daily lives? Well, we need to start with the data. If AI is the rocket, then data is the rocket fuel. I used to spend a whole lot of time racing sailboats. And now, as the navigator, I had information coming at me from all directions: charts, forecasts, the race committee, my skipper. I had to process all of that information and turn it into something useful to make the boat go fast and in the right direction. So, what if we expand this analogy to the housing sector? Think about all the data surrounding a home. You've got documents, you've got sensor data, you've got call logs, you've got service requests. Each one of these generates its own little world of data. And pretty soon you've got to navigate a vast ocean of information. If you don't take anything from this session away today, but this, I want you to remember that data is about doing. It's not about the data. We've got that massive pile of information floating around out there, and we might have some really fancy systems to ingest that information and store it. But if I don't do anything with it, then what's the point? If I'm not gaining new insights from it, there's no real benefit. I'm just storing a bunch of information. We want to turn that data into knowledge that can be applied to our business. So if we quickly go back to the housing example, if we're tracking a domain-specific pattern, such as water usage, and all of a sudden that usage stops in a particular home, we've gathered that information, we've got it stored somewhere, we might have a dashboard that's giving us this information, and all of a sudden we've got a big red light that flashes up that says this house hasn't been using any water in the past 4 days. We've got an anomaly in our pattern. What might that tell us? Certainly something's not right. But if we've got additional information, we're not just monitoring water consumption. Our systems are connected. Our data tells us that an elderly lady lives in that flat on her own. Now that service call takes on a whole other dimension. You need to go check more than just the pipes in this case. You might want to check that the resident's okay as well. Connecting all the data we have available to the business and thinking about it from a human-centered perspective is what we mean by human-centered design improving people's lives. We're not just reducing mean time to failure or service ticket resolution KPIs. So Ajay, do you have anything to add before I go on?
No, I think that to be honest, Christian, I think that summed that slide up quite well, actually.
Thanks for that. So how do we move from data to knowledge? Microsoft has a whole bunch of tools that can help you do that. And if we look at the left-hand side of the screen, we can see that data is coming at us from all different sources. We've got applications, we've got sensors and devices, IoT devices on our refrigerators these days. Who'd have thought? Data sources from the web, from Twitter streams and Facebook, just all kinds of information that's accessible to us. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the people who are consuming this information, applications that are surfacing this information for our customers or our business to use, and automated systems that are helping to keep all of this up and running. So when we look at data ingestion, Microsoft has several different tools to help you pull the data in from the various sources and to just store it raw as is, or do some transformations against that information so that you get it in the shape you need it to be in for applications further down the line. We've got the IoT hub that manages all of your IoT sensors, not only helping you to pull the streaming data from the sensors, but also to deal with the firmware on the sensors and the security related to those sensors. Once we've got the data coming in, whether we've stored it raw as is, or whether we've done some transformations, or whether it's streaming in, we've got to put it somewhere. So there are multiple landing areas that you could choose from depending on the nature of your application. Plain old blob storage in a data lake, or if you've got low latency, globally distributed applications, you might want to consider Cosmos DB. SQL Azure database is still running strong and is absolutely a great choice in many situations. SQL managed instance, if you have older systems that you've migrated that are not quite yet ready to be in a standalone Azure database. And then there is Azure Synapse Analytics, which is what we used to call Azure SQL Data Warehouse. It's been rebranded. It's the same massively parallel processing data warehouse appliance that's in Azure. It's just called Azure Synapse Analytics now, and it's completely appropriate for large-scale data warehousing projects where you're dealing with terabytes of data that you're having to process and do aggregates over time. And of course, on-premises SQL Server 2019 is still available as an option if the Azure offerings are not suitable for your use case. Then there's the tools that help us manage big data and the streaming data that comes in from our IoT devices. So we've got Stream Analytics, we've got HD Insight, we've got Databricks that deals with streaming data. You've got to capture all of that information coming off the IoT devices. You don't want to store all of it. You have you'd run out of space, but you want to act on the things that are important as you've defined in your user stories and your business problems. So you use Stream Analytics or HD Insight or Databricks to pull out the important information from that stream of information, and then do your analysis on that. And analysis services is still alive if you've got tabular models that you're wanting to run for your reporting services. So that's available to you as well. Machine learning suite of tools. If you want to develop your own machine learning algorithms, you've got multiple tools there to help you take all of this data that you've collected and cleaned, and then feed into your different models, run your models, and view the history of those, the model performance, so that you can see what the accuracy of those models and the history of the runs over time, so that you can decide which one is the best tuned and the most suitable for your production needs. And then you can use the Machine Learning Studio to help you deploy that to production, whether it's deployed into a SQL Server database or deployed as an API. Multiple ways to get access to that productionized version of the model that you've developed. And on the very last, we need to mention that we support both Python and R. We try to be fairly platform agnostic when it comes to our development tools, so that the skills that your development team has, they don't have to go and learn a new language. They can bring with them what they know already. Operationalization. This is important because we don't want to be doing all of this stuff by hand. We want to be able to automate this ingestion and storage and analysis process. So we've got multiple tools to help you do that. And Power BI to help you visualize, because like I said, data is about doing, right? It's not about the data. If we don't have some way to present the information that we've gathered and show that to the people who can go do important things with it, then what's the point? So Power BI is our tool to help you create those visualizations to demonstrate what you've gathered from the analysis of the data. And lastly, we have some pre-built machine learning models that get all lumped in under the title cognitive services, but they're like the closed captioning that you see right now. That is live text, speech to text machine learning model that Power BI, sorry, not Power BI, but PowerPoint connects to our API and is able to get that connected into the system so that we can have that live speech to text rendering as the application is running. So if you want to have translation, if you want to have custom vision, capabilities and image recognition, if you want to have video indexing, there's probably about at least 30, we may be up to 50 different cognitive services that you can use to enhance your existing applications. So that's something to check out if you don't have a team of developers sitting on hand to build these machine learning models for you. There might be something pre-built already that you can just go ahead and plug in. Now, there's going to be questions because there's a lot of stuff.
I think it's a good point to mention. You know, Microsoft have the capability to support a lot, and it's primarily around the application and data side, as you can see on the screen. But you know, we do appreciate there are so many other aspects and variables of this, whether it's the hardware, you know, the sensors and the devices, whether it's supported services with connecting multiple different data sources, or it's just your existing infrastructure and how we bolt on an influx of data going into it and processing and analysis of that data. You can't do it with a single vendor, and we're fully aware of that. Microsoft are also very aware of that. You can achieve so much more by combining multiple different vendors together, and that's really where you start to glue in that end-to-end solution as well. And it's worth mentioning as well, you know, we've got proof of concept funding available to support customers with any Azure transformation or any Azure workloads that they want to explore on that screen as well. So I can hopefully get customers started there as well. Thanks, Christine, over to you.
Unless there are any questions in the chat window that we need to address, I think we're kind of finished with this slide. It's a big toy box full of Lego. There's all kinds of different stuff, and sometimes you need a bit of help navigating, trying to decide whether table storage makes sense, whether Cosmos makes sense, whether we need analysis services, or can we just use Power BI with the embedded tabular model that runs that? How do I know which tool is appropriate for the job? And that's where Bechtle comes in to help you make those decisions, and then we're there to support Bechtle as they have additional questions or need more information from us directly. So
doesn't look like any questions so far. So there isn't any questions so far. So it might be worth just going on to the maturity curve.
Let's go ahead and move on to the AI maturity curve then. If you've got all these tools to work with, but you need to identify where you sit on the AI maturity curve first so that you can start your own digital transformation. Some of you may already be in a situation where you've got a robust solution already in production, and that you're using that for, let's say, supply chain management. You've got some sort of machine learning algorithm in place that helps you move your products around so that you get them to the right place at the right time and you're not overspending or underspending. But most companies, I think, are probably somewhere floating between that approaching and aspirational segment. If you're still at foundational, it's time to get with the program. You need to get some folks in to come help you dig through what the possibilities are, and maybe have some envisioning sessions and look at what take stock of what you've got in your company and see where the low-hanging fruit might be. But at any stage of this curve, we can help you take that further. But it's definitely just pop this slide in with your managers one day and say, hey, where are we? Have we thought about this? Where do we think we land? And Bechtle can help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good place to sort of summarize and bring it back to some basic, easy takeaways for you guys as well. So to keep things simple and to move up this maturity curve, there's kind of three things that I want you kind of to take away. So firstly, define the problem that you want to solve with AI. We need to know where that end goal is. The second point is around outline what your gaps are, skills, legacy, business drive, and then we can do a workshop with you to understand what that is. And then also we can bring in the necessary vendors required to support that. And then finally, look at what you have already in place and consider where the potential improvements can be made using AI, or whether you actually might already have it and you just need to turn it on, such as the speech to text detection as well. And like I said, little wins all build up as well. So with all of this, we can set some clear goals and milestones to move up the curve, but we can also then define what the financial costs are and the long-term return. And then hopefully that can be shown for a saving and then through adopting an AI end-to-end solution. So thanks everyone. We're going to move on to the questions for a second, and I'm just going to look and see if there's any further questions came in. There was one question around retail sector. So Christina, do you mind giving, the question is, do you have any examples of retail, of AI working in the retail sector?
So supply chain management was one of the areas that we see frequently. Also, recommendation engines are another that are quite popular. And another example that I've seen is a solution that one of our startups built to scan all the different prices for products. Say I want to sell a widget, so this tool scans all the prices for the same widget and then helps them to make the pricing model recommendation for this particular store, so that it gets the best price it can, or places the best price that it can on their widgets to sell the most opportunity to sell them. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Pricing comparison, pricing tools. But I can send there. What is the link? We have some links that talk about the different products that we offer in the retail sector. So I can forward that information to you, Ajay, and you can then forward that to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, no, and actually we'll do that across multiple different sectors as well for anyone who wants it, just to give them an idea or again provoke some thought around how it could work for them.
Just as for quicks, if you Bing AI in retail and Microsoft case studies, you'll come up with lots of stuff quite quickly, I think.
Perfect.
Besides what I forward to you.
There doesn't seem to be any further questions. So, Christina, if you mind just swapping to the next slide, I can just explain what's coming up. So, keeping on the idea of AI and robots, the next webinar is going to be around robotic process automation, so RPA. So we're going to look at what that is, how it works, and where that can solve some challenges around some mundane and admin tasks that you've got within your organization. And then we're also going to look at device as a service and why that's become a very hot topic at the moment, and hopefully save you guys some money as well with DAS as well. So hopefully these you can join us for those as well. There isn't any further questions, but we will stay on till 11:40. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask. If not, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you, Christina, as well.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure.